Exciting news, ladies. You are officially invited. Yes, you're invited to join us in Fertility Awareness Mastery Live. This is my 10-week group coaching program designed to help you gain confidence using fertility awareness. Whether you're actively avoiding pregnancy or looking to optimize your cycles for conception, we have a spot for you. We start the third week of September. Are you ready to jump in? Head over to fertilityfriday.com/fam, F-A-M, to register today. That's fertilityfriday.com/fam. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 380. Welcome to the Fertility Friday podcast, your source for information about the Fertility Awareness Method and all things fertility. I'm your host, Lisa Hendrickson-Jack. I'm the author of The Fifth Vital Sign and the Fertility Awareness Mastery Charting Journal. I'm a certified fertility awareness educator and holistic reproductive health practitioner with nearly 20 years of experience teaching women to connect to their fifth vital sign through menstrual cycle charting, balancing hormonal health, and optimizing the menstrual cycle without hormones. I'm outspoken about hormonal birth control and its impact on fertility and overall health because you have the right to know how your body works and how artificial hormones disrupt that natural process. I host live coaching programs to help you achieve optimal fertility and health because it's important to have healthy menstrual cycles regardless of whether or not you want to have babies. I'm also a wife and mother of 2 beautiful boys. I know, I'm a busy girl, but I managed to fit it all in. This podcast is designed to empower you to take full control of your cycles, your fertility, and your overall health. And I'm so excited that you're here with us today. Today I'm sharing a brand new episode in my Fertility Awareness reality series. And I'm sharing an interview/conversation that I had with one of my clients, Sydney. Sydney was a member of my most recent Fertility Awareness Mastery Live group coaching program. And when we recorded the episode, we were a couple weeks out from our last session. I really liked this interview and our conversation because we really got into some of the specific challenges with kind of wrapping your head around using fertility awareness for birth control. And we kind of dove deep into some of those aspects of it. And what I mean by that is that I've talked about this a lot on the podcast. Fertility awareness is a user-dependent method. So that means that the success of it is based on you, the user. And there's 2 kind of main aspects to that. So one is that you need to understand the rules and you need to be confident and comfortable enough in the rules so that it's like black and white, so that you know every single day of your cycle whether or not it's a fertile day. But believe it or not, that's not the only aspect of it. There's also this kind of underlying emotional aspect of it where you really have to check in with yourself regarding your intentions, your fears, your uncertainties, and your potentially conflicted feelings about pregnancy. So for some of you who are listening, it might feel just totally black and white. Like, I'm not trying. How could you be not black and white about this? Or I am trying and I have been trying. So, for some of you who are listening, you're definitely like either not trying or trying, and that's it. But what I've found over the years is that there's a pretty significant percentage of women who are not just completely black and white in either camp, who are actively trying or actively avoiding. There are many, many women who kind of sit somewhere in the middle and are not necessarily 100% committed to either. What we talk about in today's episode is how to utilize and use fertility awareness to the highest efficacy, following all the rules, even if you have some kind of conflicting feelings around it. It's a really great topic. I feel like it was just a lot of fun to have that conversation. And it's something that I talk about with all of my clients. It's one of the topics, modules, if you want to call it, in my Fertility Awareness Mastery Live group coaching program. And it's something that I speak about with all of my clients who are actively avoiding. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into today's episode with Sydney. Well, I'm really excited to be here today with Sydney. Sydney is a member of my most recent Fertility Awareness Mastery Live program, and we just wrapped up a couple of weeks ago. So this is super fun because we get to see each other a couple of weeks after the program has ended. So welcome to the show, Sydney.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. So I feel like I know you a little bit because we were together for a couple of months, but maybe just tell us a little bit about you and your cycles. So I feel like there's probably more podcasts that do this now, but I feel like on this podcast is where I get to ask, how old were you when you had your first period? What were those kind of first cycles like? And then, have you used contraceptives before? So kind of take us through what led you to wanting to learn FAM now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so my first period was, I think, grade 8, which I think is fairly normal. And it wasn't painful. Like, it was completely fine. I just didn't know a lot about it, right? No education. And then in 2014, from 2014 to 2015, I went on the birth control pill, and I didn't go on for like contraceptive reasons. I went on for like, I think it was mood swings and acne, but yeah, I think that's what it was. And honestly, it did help. Like, it didn't help my acne, but it did help my mood swings. But it quickly went downhill from there. And I didn't realize until after I got off the pill how it made me feel. And I always tell people, like, it made me feel like a shell of a human being. And I hated that so much. So I think that's what started my intrigue to fertility awareness. And yeah, that's it. Short and sweet.
Okay. Well, I feel like I just need to backtrack to what you said, because you said it made you feel like a shell of a human being.
Yeah.
That's a pretty bold statement. But the thing is, I've heard statements like that before.
Yeah.
Right. So would you be able to just deepen into that a little bit? Like, tell us take us into what that was like for you, because you also said that you didn't realize it until you came off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, okay. So I think a big part of it was the pill bleeds. You don't, like, at the time I didn't know it was a real period. Oh no, at the time I thought it was a real period. I thought the pill bleeds was a real period, but something about them just felt off, and it just felt so unhealthy, because it was like the blood in particular was very like thin and just like dark. Like, it didn't even feel like blood. It was very weird. So that was a big red flag for me. But just in terms of how I felt, like, emotionally, like, yes, it got rid of my mood swings, but also, like, there was no moods, like, it got rid of everything. Yeah, I think those are the two biggest things.
Yeah, that's so interesting. That's so interesting the way you describe it. So it's just because over the years, I've done a lot of interviews with women, and I've spoken to a lot of women about their experiences on the pill. And so I've heard similar stories. It's hard to put your finger on, sometimes hard to describe, but essentially what you've said and what I've heard other women say, it's kind of like you end up with like a flattened mood, or like I've heard some people call it loss of affect. So it's like you're not getting the high highs and the low lows, and that can be nice because you're more stable, but you're like not like a human anymore.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy. Oh my God.
Well, and then the bleeding part is interesting as well, because it's interesting. I have a memory just of my own personal experience with being on the pill, because I took the pill in my kind of early to mid-teens. That's more accurate, mid-teens.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like when I was on the pill, and I didn't really think about it, obviously, and I wasn't using a menstrual cup. I was using pads and tampons for the most part. So I also wasn't necessarily seeing it as readily.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt like when I was on the pill, the actual blood was more brown. Like it wasn't as red. That was my experience. I don't know what other women, I should start asking. Then we can get more of a sample, our case study research on the podcast. But when I remember distinctly that when I came off the pill, my period was so red. And I remember it was just like, wow.
Yeah.
It was so different to what the bleed was like on the pill. So I can relate.
Yeah. And I don't know, I guess you were really young, but to me, it just like when you see that bright red, you're like, oh, I'm alive. I feel healthy.
I did feel healthy, but I remember it was so different, such a contrast that I remember being like, wow. So it was one of those moments too of like, these things are not the same. Like the bleeding when you're on the pill is not the same, at least in my case, to when you're not on the pill. It's very different. And so, yeah, that is very interesting. I love what you said. It got rid of my mood swings, but there were no moods.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, so now, and just to kind of put that into context, so that would have been about 6-ish years ago. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Well, and so then since then, well, and you can answer or not, but since then, how have you kind of been managing your fertility? And because you went off the pill, so then you weren't on the pill. And I'm assuming you don't have children yet.
No.
because I've read your intake form.
Yeah.
So I asked this because, as you can appreciate, there's a lot of women that are completely terrified of coming off the pill because now, and I talk about this a lot because it's just mind boggling, but now the message to younger women is it's either you're on the pill or it's just a matter of time until you get pregnant. And so you're basically told that if you're off the pill, you're just like a ticking time bomb. Like, so how did you manage that?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think, okay, so, well, to be fair, I haven't had many, like, I wasn't super sexually active. Yeah, so there's that. But while I did feel like, I guess I was ignorant, honestly, because I read Taking Charge of Your Fertility because I was using condoms and I wanted to learn more about my body. And I knew that fertility awareness could make me feel more comfortable. And also I really just did not want hormonal contraceptives. So it was almost like my only option.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I got sidetracked. What was the question?
Well, you answered the question because it was basically like, how did you kind of manage your fertility? Because it's been several years since you came off the pill. And I think you bring up two very important points. The first point is that women are indiscriminately put on birth control, assuming that they're the ticking time bomb. But every woman is different in terms of her relationship status and all of those things. So it is there's this underlying assumption, I suppose, that everyone just needs to be on the pill all the time. When if you're kind of living your life, you're between relationships and you're not having a lot of sex, arguably you're not at risk of getting pregnant. So I feel like it just adds more context to the conversation itself.
Yeah.
And then also, I grew up in a generation where we were told that condoms worked. So ask any woman who's like in their late 30s, early 40s. We grew up in the AIDS time, like the 80s and 90s were when my sex ed education was like, if you have sex unprotected, you'll get AIDS and die. Like that's what they said.
Oh my God.
Legit. Like ask anyone who's 40. It can't just be me. Like this is like they said that.
Oh my
And
God.
so I grew up in the time where it wasn't just like you'll get pregnant, right? And your life will be over, but it was like you'll get AIDS and die. So they were very heavily stressing condoms. And because they were heavily stressing condoms, they were also heavily telling us that condoms have a 98% efficacy rate when used correctly. So yes, the typical use rate can be different, but you can use a condom correctly for the most part, and if you can kind of learn the correct use of condoms. So just to kind of flesh that out a little bit, because for whatever reason, in this day and age now, for young women who are trying to navigate their way through all of this, they're essentially being told that condoms are not sufficient, which is ironic because they have a 98% efficacy rate when used correctly.
Yeah.
And if you are committed to using it correctly and your partner is on board with that, you can do that. And if you add fertility awareness to the mix, of course, then you can identify your fertile window and take extra precautions when you're on your fertile days. I feel like it's not impossible. And I hope that that's the message that comes across.
Yeah. And honestly, when I learned, like I've always felt very safe using condoms. And and as well as fertility awareness. Like even before I joined the program, I felt very like there's so many signs to look for in fertility awareness that I just, even if I've screwed up one, I would still be fairly safe or fairly certain. Right?
Yeah, that's a good point, because it's not like you're only watching, depending on the method that you're choosing. So, of course, the method that I teach in my classes is the symptothermal method. And so we're looking at the mucus, the temperature, and the cervical position if you want. We also add in elastin fertility calculations. So we're covering all the bases, doing cross checks, doing all the things, all the boxes are checked. And so you're right. If your mucus is weird one cycle, or if you have a yeast infection, you still have the temperature and the cervical position and the elastin fertility calculation to fall back on. And so you really are, like, you do have all your bases covered. And if you're doing all that and you wear a condom, if you ever, during those fertile days as well, or et cetera, then yeah, you have a lot of ways, a lot of moving parts that work together to make it work for you.
Yeah.
Well, so let's dive into the session part of our session. The listeners can't see your charts, but I'm going to pull them up. I guess we can start with an update, and also if there's specific questions that you wanted to talk about today. I feel like in our last session, we talked a lot about your period pain and we strategized on that. And I feel like I got, well, yeah. So tell me about what happened there.
I'm so excited. Okay, yeah. So just for context for the listeners, my period pain was 10 out of 10 bad. Like I would even go further than 10. Like, and it was very dynamic pain too. Like it wasn't just like period like uterine cramps. It was like body aches, and like all my muscles were sore, and like I would have fever symptoms, and like I would be in bed for 3 to 4 days.
Well, and I want you to,
and like,
I want you to like tell us more, because could you describe it a little bit more? I mean, so it's full body aches, but were you also experiencing localized pain in the pelvic area? And like, is it concentrated in one area, or is it everywhere? Just tell us a little bit more about the pain.
Well, yeah, definitely concentrated in the uterine area for sure. It just felt it almost felt like just like swollen, like just like super inflamed. So inflamed that it was like radiating out into the rest of my body. The last time we spoke, right, it was a 10 out of 10. And then I since it was so painful, I changed a few things, right? So I did the zinc and the magnesium. I kind of always took magnesium, but I upped it. I did the yoni steaming, which I love, even just for like relaxation. Oh, it's so nice. What else did I do? Switched up my diet, increased protein, and decreased like complex carbs. And I think that's all the changes that I made. And this past cycle was like, it was like night and day. I was like, it blew my mind. I don't know. I wish I knew what it was, because I changed so many things. I was desperate to not be in that pain that I just tried everything. But yeah, I literally only had 1 day of pain, and the rest was very, 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 very mild. Like I could still feel inflammation. I still had kind of hot flashes, but yeah, it was amazing.
Well, that is amazing news.
Yeah, so I just really need to thank you. Like, I don't know how you did it, but like, I think it was the zinc or the diet changes.
I mean, it's hard to say from experience and things like that. Zinc is taken in the correct amount is one of the kind of strongest defenses against the inflammation. So I found it's about taking the right amount. And also we talked about the strategy of taking it before. So for several days before your period arrives. So it's not like zinc is an Advil. So you can't just like pop a zinc like you would pop an Advil and expect to have the improvement. It has to, it's a different approach to it. And so you're kind of systematically reducing the inflammation. And when you're charting, and your period is coming and all that. So I know we had talked about those things. And I remember when we had that conversation, because we didn't have a full cycle, like your period was right around the corner.
Yeah.
And you were kind of like, should I start now? And I was like, well, yeah, let's just jump in and see how many days of your luteal you have left.
Yeah.
And so one of the challenges, though, when you try a few things at once, obviously, and you've alluded to this already, is that especially when you've had period pain for a long time, because many women have had the experience. I don't know if you've ever had this experience, Sydney, where you try some things and your period sucks most of the time. And then there's like this one random cycle where you have very little pain, but you can never like replicate it. And it's just super frustrating. I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but I know I did in my early kind of days because my periods were really ridiculous when I was a teenager in my very early 20s. And there would be like one time a year or something, or mine were generally bad all the time. So but it would just be like this one-off where I wouldn't have pain and I would have no idea why.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I hope that wasn't what this is.
No. So I use that as an example to say that this time, though, you did make specific intentional changes. And so I would, from my experience and based on the protocol and how it's worked for other clients, I would suspect that the biggest factors would be the zinc and the magnesium, followed by, of course, the changes that you made, reducing sources of inflammation in the diet. So I would encourage you to do that again, right? And that's going to show you if it's like replicatable, right? So in the scenario and example that I was sharing, it's more of like, you didn't really actively try anything, but then you have this period that's less painful and you're just not sure what it was. But in your case, you had a specific strategy. So you're more kind of thinking, what is the thing?
Right.
So with the steaming, what my experience has been with clients is that the steaming can be really helpful for the quality of the period. And I'm sure that there are women who have over time experiences where the steaming may help with pain over time. But in terms of acute cycle to cycle, I have not had a lot of clients who steam only and experience the pain going away, if that makes sense. So I think the steam is helpful. And I'm just sharing from my client experiences. So for anyone who's more experienced in steaming that has had a different experience, I am not trying to confirm or deny. But when a client comes to me with pain specifically, the steaming is something that may be helpful for, like I said, the quality of menstruation, but it's not my first go-to for pain. So that's kind of how I would break down what you did and the potential effect. So I wouldn't say don't do it. I would say do it, but know that likely the zinc, the magnesium, and some of the dietary changes were likely kind of at the top of what was reducing that feeling of swollen uterus.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that feels right. Definitely.
Cool. Like moving forward. So continue and chart, obviously keep charting your cycle, identify when your period is coming, and then apply the same principles again. So during the, 5 days or so leading up to your period plus the first 2. So then you're kind of doing that protocol for that period of time, and you can build on it a bit. So you can, in general, think about things that are going to reduce inflammation. So if you eat fish, you can eat fish during that week before, like just make a point of eating it more, eating zinc-rich foods, right? In addition, supplementation is necessary from my perspective when your period is so painful. But with that said, you could consider adding in oyster if you want to, and if you have access to it and all those things. So just kind of, you could think about, because you got to eat, right? So you could incorporate more fish during that time so that you're getting more omega-3s, or do some more fish oil, but think about other anti-inflammatory options, I suppose.
So I'm curious if, because I've been meaning to do the liver, but yeah, I'm curious if that would help with inflammation, because I know that it's more along the lines of like increasing your vitamins and minerals, right?
Yeah, I mean, liver's high in vitamin A, B vitamins, iron. There is some zinc, so it does. It does. In terms of, in general, it's helpful, and even if you think about your period, you're losing blood, so eating liver as a source of iron is really helpful in general. So certainly I would say yes, but I would think more in an overall generalized kind of way, not necessarily a specific eat liver, have less painful periods type of way.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So, my go-to sources of zinc, and interestingly enough, so for most people, like the average person, their largest source of zinc in the diet is typically red meat, which is interesting. And red meat in general, it seems to have a higher level of zinc than liver, although liver still has a good amount. And then you've got the shellfish, oysters, mussels, which are a high source of zinc.
Okay.
To the point where they're considered aphrodisiacs for men. Just putting it out there.
The more you know, I love it.
Yeah. Have your partners eat oysters, ladies.
Yes.
Raise that libido. All right. Well, I'm going to take a peek at your chart here. I know we were kind of getting the chart information organized before the call, and you were mentioning that because you're kind of in the middle of your chart here. So did you have any charting questions or anything, or even questions about, I know we've kind of gone over it. We went over it in class, but I always take the opportunity to ask if you have any questions about the rules, birth control rules, or any of those things.
So I don't have any questions about birth control rules because I'm not currently sexually active, but I'm honestly so excited to start like trying it out. I know that's okay. That sounds weird. But yeah, I'm excited to feel confident about it is what I'm saying.
It's time, ladies. Time to take your fertility awareness knowledge and confidence to the next level. Just popping into today's episode to invite you to join us for the next round of Fertility Awareness Mastery Live, my 10-week group coaching program that's designed to help you unlock the secrets of your menstrual cycle. Fertility Awareness Mastery teaches you everything you need to know about using fertility awareness cycle tracking to achieve your intentions. Whether you're currently trying to get pregnant, avoiding pregnancy, or planning to conceive in the future, we've got you covered. This program goes deep. Get to the root of your period problems, hormone imbalances, fertility challenges, and so much more. Early bird registration is now open, but only for a limited time. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/FAM, F-A-M, to register today. That's fertilityfriday.com/FAM. Now let's go ahead and jump back into today's episode.
Yeah, I don't think I have any specific charting questions.
Well, let me just ask you a question.
Yeah.
I'm like, because so it's good when you, like, I feel like there's positives and negatives with every scenario. So when you're not partnered and you're learning the method, it's actually great in a number of ways because you get to chart without the pressure of having to answer questions.
Yeah.
Like, can we do it today? Like you don't have the pressure. So it's really great because it allows you to really learn, and then you can really get a sense of your cycles. And of course, I'm teaching a different method, even though you were charting before. And so you get to have an opportunity to kind of like work that all out.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the downside is that you don't have somebody asking you, can we do it today? So it can feel a little bit less urgent. And so, because then if you find yourself partnered, let's say 2 months from now, and you have to make these decisions, how comfortable would you feel knowing that? So that's kind of me putting on my educator hat and just making you think about those things, because it's one thing to feel confident in general, in theory, but like, what if you had that kind of immediate like situation where you actually had to organize that? How confident do you feel about the rules in that hypothetical?
Yeah. Like the hypothetical that I am all of a sudden partnered up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I need to immerse myself in this thought, in this scenario. I'm the type of person that is, like, I want to say impulsive, but that's kind of the wrong word. I don't worry too much about it. I think I would be very confident. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so to kind of break down what my kind of suggestions or recommendations would be in that situation would just be like, as you're tracking, think about that. And you can even create a line on your chart in your app to say like sex ? And like yes or no, or like whatever emoji.
Yeah.
Like how would you rate today? Is today like fertile or infertile? And make yourself do that, because then you would actually like be thinking that on a day-to-day basis. Just to practice, train yourself. Because what can happen, so we talked about this in class, the pre-ovulatory phase is the only part of the cycle where pregnancy is possible. And so that's the part where you have to be like laser. It's either yes or no. And so that's where we use the combination of the mucus and the last infertility calculation to really narrow that down and hone in on that so that you can be more comfortable and confident. And when you do that, you may find yourself thinking on some of those pre-ovulatory infertile days, like, I don't know. And so this will give you the practice. So if it's, I don't know, then it's a no, because we talked about this in class. And so when you're unsure, it's fertile, just to be clear how to address that situation. But that's how you do it. And then I feel like you'd feel quite confident to tell your partner, like, yay or nay. Like, I don't feel like you'd have a problem there. But for you to first know, that's what we got to get on top of. And then in terms of confirming before the the post-ovulatory phase, that's a bit more straightforward, but it's always, from my perspective, going back to the basics. So doing your cross check. So doing the temperature, looking for the third high temp, and matching that up with the fourth day after peak, later of the two, like math class, which one is later, and being very objective, black and white, straightforward about it. Yeah. So then the only wild card that you cannot do anything about now is when you're partnered. Between you and your partner, you determine what's comfortable for you, what's best for your relationship in terms of how you're going to manage the fertile window. So you might have an idea about what would work best for you, but you might find a partner who's absolutely not comfortable with real talk, right? Some people are really great with condoms and they love it and it works for them. And other people don't. And it's not always like male and female. Like, so sometimes it's like the female doesn't like the condom because she doesn't like how it feels. And sometimes it's the male that really likes the condom, right? Like, so that's something to think about, and you can't really navigate that. But the other aspects of it, the yay or nay, green light or red light, you can do.
Yeah. The other aspect that really, really impacted me during the course was like your subconscious, like where are you on the scale of like, I can have a baby right now? That's how you put it, right?
Yes.
That's like another aspect that's kind of like driving your subconscious, like, and that like blew my mind because it's so true. Like I'm a person who's very like, go with the flow. And although I'm young and I don't want a baby, I'm very much like, if it happened, I would be okay. And so I really think that impacts my subconscious when I'm like choosing like to have sex or not to have sex, and like with what protection. So yeah, I have to be very cautious about that. After you said that, I was like,
that's me. Well, so for the listeners that are kind of like half getting it. So basically what Sydney's alluding to is the concept of the intention scale, which I'm sure I've talked about on the podcast before. And so, as you're listening right now, from 0 to 10, so 0 is that you don't want a baby. And you would, like, if the condom broke, you'd probably take the morning after pill. You probably already have it in your drawer because you're at a 0. And then 10 is you're trying, and you're maybe even in the 2-week wait now, and you've got a birth, like you've got a pregnancy test in your, right? So we've got two different sides. And so we talk about that a lot in class. But the one takeaway that I think is helpful for you, Sydney, so as you're listening, like for all the listeners to the podcast right now, think about where you are on that scale, and then ask yourself if your partner is at the same number. Because sometimes you assume, and if you don't really know, or you're making an assumption and you're partnered, go ask your partner, right? And find out what his number is, because it might not be the same as yours, and his number might surprise you. Because and the number can change. So you can be one number, and then like 2 months later, you could be a totally different number. Like this you got to keep checking in with yourself about this, because this is a method that requires your participation. But the point, I think the takeaway point for you is that you can be like a 5, like I'm in the middle, whatever is clever, right? And there's nothing wrong with that at all.
Okay,
like,
good.
That's where I'm at, like a 5 right now. Maybe more like a 7. Actually, but we're not trying. I am not trying.
Okay.
But anyways, my point though is that you could be at a 5 or at a 7, and you can still act like you're at a 0.
Okay. Yes.
Like, see, that's why you learn the rules. Like, so you can have all the feels and all the emotions, but you could still follow the rules.
Right.
And I mean, at the end of the day, like the purpose of this method is, in many ways, it gives you choices, it gives you information. So ultimately, you're making an informed decision. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and that can be good or bad. It's a really big decision of when to have a baby. And so sometimes it's easier to not have to make that decision, right? Just to be a little bit more gray with your actions.
I
And
know,
then the
right?
decision kind of makes itself. So I can appreciate that. This is complicated stuff. But when I put on my educator hat, my goal is to help you to be as effective as possible. And so you can feel all the feels and your ovaries can be talking to you and stuff.
Yeah.
And you can still act like a zero by applying the rules. And so I think that like the extra line and like the yes or no exercise for the next couple cycles, I think that'll be really helpful for you.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks. That makes me feel better because yeah, when you brought up the intention scale, it kind of made me nervous, but you're right. I can still act.
Well, one of the things I probably shared, because I usually share this when I talk about the intention scale, is that when I first started in this work, I was like 19. So I was a baby, a child. And so with that said, I was very naive. I would say maybe innocent or naive. So what I mean by that is that I was a zero, like when I was 19. It was like very straightforward. Zero. Like I didn't want to get pregnant when I was in university. Like it was just very like black and white to me.
Yeah.
And so when I started working with actual real human beings, and I discovered that most women are actually not at a 0 or a 10.
Mm-hmm.
And that blew my mind. I was like, what do you mean you're like a 4? That's so reckless, right?
Yeah.
With my 19-year-old self, no life experience. And like very like black and white. But anyways, as I've matured and grown, I really feel like I understand it more deeply now because it's complicated, especially now that I have children myself and I am not at a 0 and I'm not at a 10. So now I am literally the embodiment of that experience. So yeah. I think this is what's really helpful. I think with fertility awareness, we got to talk through all that stuff because ultimately, you know, it is a user-dependent method. It is based on your choices, but it's not something you have to be afraid of because the emotions are all over the place, but the rules are actually the same, always.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So like I said, you can be whatever, how you can have all the subconscious, all the feels, but you can make a decision, you know? And and the other thing too is that it really depends on your goals. When I have a client who is like at a 0, right? Like she doesn't want a pregnancy at this particular point in time. She makes it like work, like because that is her goal and that is her intention. She's very intentional with her actions and her charting to make that happen. So the bottom line is that it's possible. Mm-hmm. Now, I also have clients that are maybe more at like a 6 or 7, like, and to give us an example of a scenario, you know, maybe you're in a committed relationship and it wouldn't be the greatest thing if you got pregnant like this month because you've got this move coming up and stuff like that. So you'd rather wait until the fall kind of thing, but it wouldn't be like the end of the world. That's like a 6 or a 7, like for example. And so in that case, she knows the rules too, but she might have sex on a fertile day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but at the end of the day though, like she knows it's a fertile day and she's choosing to have sex on it and not use protection. So I feel like with fertility awareness, it's not about like, is the method going to fail? Do I have to be afraid? No, you don't. The rules always stay the same. Like you just have to understand which days are fertile, which days are not. Then it's really up to you to make choices. So fertility awareness really kind of forces you to like put on that big girl panties or whatever and like make those choices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely at like a now that you talk about it, I'm definitely like a 1 or a 2. So
there you go. That was good, right? Like help to clarify.
Yeah.
So you weren't as open as you thought.
I wasn't, yeah.
Because like a 5 is different.
I know.
A 5 is really different to a 1.
Yeah.
Like a 1 is like, I don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
But if it does, I'm not going to immediately make a decision. Mm-hmm. That's what a 1 is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yay! Oh my God, I feel good.
Yeah. See, this is why we have to talk it through. Like, because you can do it. This is the point though, that the ultimate point is that fertility awareness, if you So it's not for everybody. Everybody under the sun is not listening to this podcast right now, because everybody under the sun is not wanting to chart their cycles. Like, that's why we have so many different methods. But if you gravitate to it and this speaks to you, the point is that you can do it if you want to. You have to want to, and you have to put in a little bit of effort to learn, similar to when I learned how to drive standard. I mean, I didn't in the car, like, it took a while. It took like a couple of months. Now I'm amazing. Am I? I don't know, but I don't stall anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
15 years in.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, so it's kind of like that, but you can do it. You definitely can do it. And so in your case, the beauty of it is that you actually do have some time to just chart, to get comfortable with all this. And by the time you're partnered at some point in the future, it'll be like old hat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, any other questions or comments or anything before we wrap up today?
No, I feel really satisfied. That was good.
Excellent. Well, I have a couple questions that I like to ask at the end, because I think it's fun. But so for anyone who's listening who is contemplating joining the Fertility Awareness Mastery program, kind of wondering what it's like to be in a room, a virtual room full of women talking about their vaginas and periods and things. What would you want her to know?
Oh, I mean, just that it's so empowering to do it. Like, if you're on the fence, I mean, there's no downside, in my opinion. Like, it's so worth it to get to know your body in depth. And like your book says, the fifth vital sign, like, read your body. Like, your body, like, has all the answers. Yeah, just do it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, and then for a woman who's on birth control and she's kind of contemplating coming off, potentially terrified that she's going to be pregnant that afternoon, what, if anything, would you want her to know?
Like, there's resources out there. There's so many resources out there, and it's like smart, educated, very well educated women out there who like work with women on getting off the pill. And it's not, I would say that you're going to feel better. And yeah, I think you're just going to feel better and just feel smarter. Is that rude to say? Okay, no.
Okay, well, I want to know why did you say smarter? Like, what do you mean by that? Like you made a good choice?
Yeah, like smarter in terms of just like wise about your body is what I mean. Like, obviously, as you say, like, birth control, like the pill is great for some women. Yeah, I just think that if you want to come off, that you should, and that you'll feel wiser in the end.
I like that. Yeah. It's it's not surprising to me because I've seen so much of it, but it is interesting to see how many women are so nervous, and for many different reasons. And much of it I understand. So this is not a judgment place. Some women are nervous because they had painful periods. And of course, I mean, I was super nervous to come off the pill because they did come back, and it was bad. There's things you can do to mitigate it. You know, if it's really bad, then certainly I think it's good to work with someone for a couple of months, even before you come off, to reduce some of that inflammation. So I think that's certainly valid. And same thing with PMS or more severe PMS, like PMDD, you know, but again, I think that it's possible. Like, if you have a legitimate like health issue and that's why you're really nervous to come off, I think just to remember that you can actually work with someone before, like for a couple of months while you're still on the pill, to kind of lessen. But at the same time, I don't think you should be afraid to come off of it, because you could just stop taking it. You don't have to wait till the end of the pill pack. You could just stop. I know. Right. I find it because it's not really a period, and it was arbitrary that they chose a certain number of days in the pack. So it's kind of like, yes, we want to be cautious in certain situations, but also you can just come off of it whenever you want.
Right. Okay. I guess I'm probably not the best person to ask, because in my opinion, the pill depletes so much of your nutrients, right? So to be nervous to come off it just feels like, in my opinion, I wouldn't be nervous, because I would almost be excited to like replenish myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So Yeah, that's my opinion.
I love it. I think that that's really helpful. And I'm sure that there's a lot of women that are like, huh, I never thought of it that way. So, well, thank you for being here, Sydney. This was super fun. I'm so glad that we got to do this.
Thank you so much. You taught me so much. I'm so grateful.
Well, thank you so much. And I'll see you soon.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode over at fertilityfriday.com/380. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode with Sydney. Like I mentioned at the top of the episode, this conversation I just found it to be really informative. And it was really great to have that on the podcast because it is something that happens in all of my classes. It's something that I talk about with all of my clients extensively. This whole concept of managing the fertile window and really kind of figuring out where you are on the intention scale and how that could relate to your behavior, but why, regardless of where you are on the intention scale, you can still be effective in your actions and how you use the method. So it is possible to achieve the high perfect use efficacy that we cite in those studies, the 99.4%. It is possible to do that, but it does take a little bit of learning, just like any new skill. And so I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode. I will link a previous episode that I recorded. So if you kind of scroll back in your podcast player, episode 244, it's called The Truth About Using FAM for Birth Control. So in that episode, I basically did a throwdown of why fertility awareness can fail for people, but how you can make it work if you're wanting to rely on this method as your primary birth control. And I feel like this is the stuff that people don't necessarily talk about because as an educator, of course, you want to present the best scenario. But at the end of the day, we have to talk about the truth. So we got to pull off the veil, look at why it is that sometimes people experience unplanned pregnancies using fertility awareness, and then, hone in on that. And so when you kind of look at the main reasons why that happens, you can really inform your own use of the method and really make the method really effective for you, regardless of where you stand on that intention scale. And so for more on this topic, definitely tune into that episode 244 because that was the whole topic of that episode. And it was really, really eye-opening, I think, for a lot of people to kind of hear that other side of it. So with that said, I hope you have a wonderful weekend whenever you're tuning into the show. And of course, as always, until next time, be well and happy charting.